Hi, and welcome to class module 10. We're going to talk about fundraising today, but before we do that, I wanted to follow up on an item from our previous class in regards to budgeting. It's talking about high school pay-for-play as an approach to funding programs. This was a concept where parents essentially paid for athletic participation in the 1970s and then gained ground as the recessions of the 80s and the 90s were around. In 1994, a survey by the National Federation of State High School Associations found that 30% of athletic directors nationwide indicated that schools raised funds for participation fees, and then another 17% were considering it for future programs. So almost 50% of programs were in this position. In 2001, a survey done in New Hampshire found that 20 out of 89 schools charged a participation fee. That's almost 25%. In Ohio, we find that the programming that they do can charge as low as $10 per student athlete to a high of $425. That's an average cost per sport of $129. The athletic directors at 3 Santa Cruz, California school districts estimate each site had to raise about $175,000 annually just to sustain their sports programs. Here in our own Frederick County, Maryland area, in 1994 they began to institute a $10 fee. And by 2004 and 5, that actually went up to $75. So you can see how that gained momentum. And this means that with 6,500 participants, they were able to generate nearly $500,000 at just $75 a person. Other state areas and counties in Maryland, as of 2003, we had Carroll, Dorchester, Montgomery, and Washington counties all joining Frederick County's plan in assessing some type of activity fee for extracurricular activities, and not just sports, but also clubs. Harford County Public Schools launched in the fall of 2013 the pay-to-play fee, and it was put into place initially to charge students $50 per sport and $25 per club or activity in high school. And by 14-15, the fee was changed to $50 per person. Charles County is the only one that has started and then stopped using those pay-to-play fees. A decrease in student participation has promoted a change in how counties are willing to raise additional funds for athletics. So let me go into our next area and talk a little bit more about fundraising. So if we're talking about the high school pay-for-play, here is a breakdown of some of the states and how many districts are using these pay-for-play fees. And then also, we can definitely see the total percentages as far as how much they're able to bring in. We should note that the level of participation fee does affect participation level. For instance, in Michigan, at schools with a fee of $100, there was a 10% reduction. And fees up to $200, a 20% reduction. And fees over $200, a 30% reduction of rate of participation. A few years ago, it was noted that the institution of a mere $30 fee to play in Montgomery County cut participation by more than 20%. So the biggest question is, why do it? Why be hassled by it? One logical answer is things are more expensive, and programs are struggling to balance budgets. So everything is more expensive. And of the 120 athletic departments that play FBS football, that's the former Division 1A programs, 106 lost money in 2009. The budget shortfall forced the University of California to cut 5 sports the following year. Virginia hit up students for an $11.9 million in fees to offset the athletic department operation. Cincinnati reached 2 consecutive BCS bowls and still found itself with $24 million in debt. Overall, for Division I athletic departments, the total expenses for the last fiscal year increased faster than revenues that were generated for the departments. Ticket sales, alumni contribution, in other words, colleges were subsidizing their sports more. In the football bowl subdivision, formerly known as D1A, the number of athletic programs that surplused dropped nearly by half, from 25 to 14. That same subdivision saw the median amount of revenue generated by the athletic departments increase only by 5-6%, while the median total expenses increased by almost 11%. So they weren't covering costs. So the football championship subdivision programs fared even worse. This would be the Division I AA. Only 2% of football programs, 6% of men's basketball programs, and 2% of women's basketball programs reported a surplus. The gap between the have and the have-nots is getting wider and wider. There's pressure on the expense side to build more facilities, to pay more for coaches, and on the revenue side, you have to hit the ceiling. And despite all of this, operating expenditures for athletics are relatively a small share of the overall academic spending, roughly about 3.5%. An athletic director was quoted in saying, "You can either create ways to add revenue or to cut costs." In other words, the contemporary economic climate has necessitated either supplemental fundraising activity at all levels of amateur sport, and just an effort to counter these trends, athletic directors have increasingly turned to a variety of programs aimed at enhancing revenues and maintaining control, as well as the quantity and the quality of their sports programs. We know that there is a need for additional revenue sources. One solution is to fundraise. And I want you to think about maybe what the climate is like in the environment that you work. For instance, could there be differences in generational giving patterns? And I'll talk about that in a further slide down the line here. A study done at the Center on Philanthropy at Indiana University in 2008 looked at 10,000 individuals and focused on whether differences in giving existed due to their age, and they grouped them in the following generational categories. First one we look at, born before 1929. They were used in the analysis, but not all. The silent generation, born between 29 and 45, are baby boomers born in 46 to 63. The X generation, born between 64 and 81. Millennials, between 81 and 94. The iGen or Gen Z, born between 95 and 2012. And those that haven't yet applied or reached the college age are Generation Alpha. They're born between 13 and, well, coming up to 2025. And here are the findings. They looked at some of the generational differences in giving, and mostly between the silent and the great generations, and the boomer and the latter generations. The silent and great differences were more likely to give for religious causes. Giving differs mostly by factors other than generation, whether it be the education attainment, frequency of religious attendance and income. To the extent that these differ by generation, they explain the observed differences in giving by people of different generations. Motivations do vary by income, race, education, region of the country, and religious attendance, but very little by generation after controls for these other factors. Millennial donors are most likely to be motivated by a desire to make the world a better place. They give consistent with their income, education level, frequency of religious attendance, and marital status. Looking at key variables to successful fundraising, we need it done as a team. One person can't do it alone. And you have to articulate your mission and your goals and a vision for athletics. This may change from year to year, and the people you're asking the money from need to believe in your vision. Bottom line, it's about relationships, and it's a sales job. Organization, planning, and the thank you, while trying to establish and sticking to a timeline and understand differences between giving patterns of the generations and also the men versus women component. And having a system of checks and balances, you set policy and strategy, not boards or groups outside the university. There are obvious pitfalls that prevent success on the fundraising front. Lack of experience, a lack of organizational support, lack of follow-up and focus, not showing the donors the results of the gift, and then restrictions placed on your efforts by the development office. Some donors, they want you to be hands-off. And then also, they don't want to be told what to do with the money by their donors. They will say, we want your money, but we don't want your 2 cents. We're going to look at 4 models of fundraising for college athletics, with some of them having applications for high school settings. The first one is our special programs or departmental initiatives. Whether it's solicitation for advertising, sale of programs or concessions, merchandising, item sales, meaning hats, cushions, bumper stickers, etc., raffles, tournaments, golf outings, celebrity dinners. We've used Oriole games in the past and having concession sales, kids' night out where we bring in local kids and essentially babysit while giving them an opportunity to play on our campus. Flea markets or silent auctions. And then the celebrity game can be one where it's a student-to-teacher game. Also student sales activities, door-to-door solicitation, sales in the high school setting. Candy tends to be a big one. Or team merchandising of t-shirts and hats and stuff. The next one is professional fundraising. We have some facts that only 14 of the 120 athletic programs in the football subdivision, Division 1A, made money in 14. So in 1965, contributions from alumni accounted for 5% of athletic department revenues. Today, external sources of athletic department revenues stand generally in this order. Cash contributions from alumni and others, about 30%. Ticket sales, just under at 28%. Payments from conferences, which include revenue from regular season television contracts or royalties from the NCAA basketball tournament contract, and football bowl game payouts, another about 17%. Local marketing income, such as maybe in-stadium signs or payments from corporate sponsors, local TV, radio, rights fees, about 10%. Knowing this, it makes sense to focus our energy on getting those contributions right. But how? Well, written solicitations return about 1%. So it's a lot of time invested and not a lot of investment return. It goes up to 40% though when you see prospects in person. The philosophy, we want your money, but we don't want your 2 cents, is coming back here. So the traditional fundraising pyramid, you must know about your prospects. The rule of thirds, you should expect 1/3 of your campaign dollars to come from the top 10 donors. The next third from the next 100 donors, and the remaining third from all the others. 80% of our gifts come from about 20% of the people. And then there's the quiet period, soliciting the top 10 and then the next 100. In the second component of professional fundraising, we're going to talk about capital projects and major gifts. Some institutions will put specifications on what they mean by a major gift. Could be anywhere from $100,000 to $1 million. They'll also take cash, securities, real estate, gifts in kind. I've seen and heard of pianos that have some rare art that might be donated, or even our own equestrian program has had horses donated that come with a value. And then employees and employers may have a program where they have a matching of gifts. They donate a certain dollar amount, their company will donate and match that amount. Planned gifts or endowment for scholarships. Normally you have a minimum amount that must be accumulated before the scholarship can be awarded. And you're looking at the interest income provided by the initial gift to be used to fund those grants. With real estate gifts, it's usually deferred through a legal instrument until the passing of the owner. Our third model is the Athletic Support Group Activity, or ASGs. And here we're looking at a group of individuals who are a primary target group. They could be alumni, they could be friends of an athletic department, or maybe a combination of both. Maybe they work within the college setting. And you want to talk about the giving levels and benefits of being a member. Establish and maybe set those up. It could be access to games or events. And it's a voluntary-based system where the board try to solicit assistance or even money, and then having them represent as many eras of the college or institution as well as many sports as possible. And then our fourth model of fundraising is the school-based large group activities. These may be your traditional car washes or bake sales, could be auctions, or even dances or programming that bring people to submitting money or paying for a service and donating that way. That's all I have for this module, and I'll talk to you in the next.